fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
Good evening, boys and girls, and welcome to the biggest little soccer podcast on the internet. It is Stateside Footy, and good God, man, it's Sunday night. This weekend is almost over, but I do digress a little bit, but it is time for MLS. And of course, this is the kickoff of the 2026 MLS season here on Stateside Footy. And of course, I asked one of the best MLS content creator in the YouTube space to join me tonight to talk a little bit about it. And of course, he is Will from MLS Moves. Good evening, Will. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Excited to talk to MLS. And we are 6 days away from the season opener, MLS opening day, right around the corner. Very excited for the 2026 season and huge year for soccer in the United States.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting, too, because number one, it felt like I just got done doing the live stream of the MLS final. And this was a very, very, very short off season. But that being said, you're absolutely right. World Cup 2026 is smack dab right in the middle of the Major League Soccer season. And it's absolutely huge on just a multitude of fronts concerning soccer in this country and what exactly that landscape will look like after the 2026 season. Of course, they're going to the European FIFA calendar, 2027, 2028. And so it's essentially going to be a sprint all the way until 2027. So it's going to be interesting to see what teams are going to have the, I guess you can say, the endurance to from now until then, who are going to be able to make it to the finish line before the calendar switches. But before I begin, please do me a favor and please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming Stateside Footy content. And of course, on Tuesday, the USMNT Yanks Abroad series returns as we recap all players that apply their trade over in Europe. So that should be fun as well, too. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the defending MLS champions, because there's been a massive brouhaha over the offseason. And of course, they lose a couple players to retirement. But that being said, they bring in 8. And I'm sure they're still looking to add as well, too. And I think really when it comes down to it, I don't think a lot of fans were happy with it. There was a lot of MLS conspiracy theories going on about how they were able to finagle all these. But that being said, when you really look at it, 4 of those guys came on frees, really, and not a lot of big transfer money, really, when you break down to it. And when you look at Miami's roster, really, you can understand exactly how they fit these pieces into place. What did you make of Miami's offseason?
I thought it was incredible. Normally when a team wins MLS Cup, which I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, they have to make a lot of sacrifice. They have to get rid of a lot of players, just cap-wise. They have to start making some subtractions and trying to, I don't want to say play money ball, but they have to start making some tough decisions. But it felt like Inter Miami, as of today, are better on paper than they were when they won the MLS Cup in 2025. And I think they've had one of the best off seasons I've ever seen in Major League Soccer history, which is scary for the league because they already just won MLS Cup and now they've added more. So I think it's been an incredible off season, and I'm curious to see what they do, not just in Major League Soccer in 2026, but what they do in the CONCACAF Champions Cup in 2026.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? Because when you look at defending champions and whether, I'll just say this. I think they actually had the best offseason of any defending champion coming off the MLS Cup, I think, in league history. Like, I think back maybe to 27 Toronto FC, and I think like that big offseason was just making sure their stars stayed in place so they can actually make a run at the Champions League the very next year. Maybe 2022, 2023 LAFC. And again, I think they just brought in Aaron Long, and I think it was Timothy Tillman came that offseason as well too. I guess at that point in time, maybe you can say, okay, they added depth and maybe that was a good thing. But really, like, when you talk about just pure unadulterated firepower, and when you think about some of the pieces that they brought in, I don't think it tops. I don't think there's any defending champion that really had topped it.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to the 2017 Toronto FC team, and going into 2018, they were obviously chasing to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup or Champions League at that point, and they played Chivas Guadalajara in the final in 2018. They had signed Gregory Vanderville. I think at the time he was playing in Turkey, obviously played at PSG before then.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
And so that was an addition that's an addition you're trying to make when you're trying to, get the experience and get some quality to win the Champions League. And then I want to say they signed a guy named Echke. Maybe I'm mispronouncing his name because that was like 7 or 8 years ago. A TAM player from Spain. I think he was in the Segunda division. Maybe he was playing for the Liga team, but they spent like 1.3 million annually on this guy. He wasn't very good, but they made a couple additions to strengthen the roster on Sebastian Jovinko, Victor Vasquez, Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, try to get these guys in there and, run for the Champions Cup, Champions League. But this just feels different because Miami really hasn't lost anybody that they would have wanted to keep outside of maybe Jordi Alba. And even as good as Jordi Alba has been, he was aging. He was getting injured a lot. He would have been 37 years old this year. He was taking up a DP spot. And I think if you look at who they replaced him with as a DP, Rame, I think it's no brainer that that's a huge upgrade. So, I mean, they checked every single possible box you could want. And we can go into detail about those signings that you said they made 8 if you want to, but it feels like they checked every single box that they set out to do at the beginning of this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Herman Berterame coming in from Monterrey for 15 million. But I think the biggest one was Tadeo Allende bringing him back from Celta Vigo. I believe 5.8 million was the transfer fee. And the interesting thing was the fact that Berterame ended up filling the third DP spot. Just, out of curiosity, that transfer fee, I would probably assume is going to be spread out over a certain time frame because of salary cap restraints. But how are they able to bring him back on a non-DP considering it was a $5.8 million transfer fee?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was kind of curious myself. I think he was making 1 million last year. Tadeo Allende was on loan. Yeah. I don't know what type of pay increase he would get, but if you follow the rules, you take the transfer fee and you average it out over the life of the deal. And as long as that is TAMable, he can be a TAM player. So if he's making, it's a 5-year deal, I think. If he's, they paid $5 million for him and he's making, that's the part that's kind of tricky. Like you said, I mean, I would assume he got a pay increase. I would like to see how they made that work. But, Inter Miami got very creative. Maybe he took a pay cut to come back, which I don't know if he would do that because he had River Plate also. So.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Plus, he just set the MLS record for most goals in the playoffs. So I understand why people might be a little bit concerned with how they got around that. I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, we'll find out if they broke the rules. I'm sure that they will definitely be investigated like they have before.
Are you sure? Are you sure about that? No, I'm just messing with you.
Yeah.
What is but by the way, what is the length of the deal? Was it 4 or 5?
I think it was 5 years. I think that the deal ends in the 2030, 2031 season.
is there a way to structure it where it's back end loaded? You know what I mean? Where the first couple years are at a specific, let's just say 1.2 per year. And by the time that year 3, year 4 comes around, that he slides into a DP where that money actually would be structured where he almost has to be a DP.
Yeah, I think they could. Yeah, well, they did that with Jordi Alba. Jordi Alba made 1.5 million his first 2 years or first year and a half in MLS, and then this year he was making 6.5 million and made him a DP. So they certainly could do that, which would make sense because who knows, the CBA is going to change in 27. There could be some, more flexibility spending wise. Salary cap can increase. They could get rid of or add more DPs. There's all kinds of different things. So yes, I would say honestly, thinking about it, they probably just backloaded it to where his salary is going to be more bloated the longer he's at the club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because you did mention the salary cap just a second ago, and it actually did go up. It seems like it went up by a full million. I think last year, at the start of the season, I think the salary cap was at 5.4. This year, to start, it's at 6.425. And so I believe just with that salary cap increase does actually give teams a little bit more flexibility, and especially when you look at Miami and their freeze, bringing in Dane St. Clair, which was just unbelievably crazy when that news broke, considering he turned down absolute crazy ass money to stay with Minnesota United. And he said, nah, man, I'm cool. I'm going down to Miami. And considering that they brought back Rios Novos and they brought in Luis Barraza as well, too. Now, all of a sudden, Miami actually has 3 goalkeepers that are absolutely unbelievable. But when you look at the depth from the team that won MLS Cup to today, I think you're absolutely right. This team got incredibly better. I guess the question that I have for you is it's interesting. It's interesting because of that depth, because when you look at Major League Soccer now, when you consider you have the CONCACAF Champions Cup, you have Leagues Cup, I think it's going to be post World Cup. And I think this year it's, teams now are going to have to travel to Mexico, which I'm absolutely 100% for. I do like the Leagues Cup, but I didn't like the idea that Mexican teams had to travel to the United States. I actually thought it should be a combination of both. And now that you have that travel going down to Mexico, and of course you still have the race to the Supporter Shield and MLS Cup playoffs, in order to actually win multiple trophies, you're going to have to be deep. Not only are you going to have to be deep, but you're going to have to know and win to rotate, not just rotate in game, but also rotate based on competition. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? But that being said, does Miami actually have that depth where we're going to be able to withstand not just the early portion of the season if injuries come, but can they do they have the depth to make it to the end line this year?
As far as MLS Cup or the CONCACAF Champions Cup? Yeah. I think so. I think they definitely do. Now, like you said, the schedule is very congested. They're going to have Champions Cup. They're going to have the World Cup, which Messi and a couple other players on the team are going to be partaking in. So it's going to be brutal, man, honestly. But that's why I think they went with this youth movement and they have all this depth now. I do think they will have the team to compete in the CONCACAF Champions Cup and not completely derail their season as your team has done before in 2022. They won it, and then it kind of screwed the rest of their season up in 2022. Yes. I think that they have the depth to withstand the congested schedule, and I do think they will be a competitor for every single trophy they go for this year. They will be a true competitor and a true maybe even favorite for all these trophies.
That would be quite interesting too, because there really hasn't been a team that actually has been able to pretty much sweep the trophy all, right? Like the idea of a domestic treble, even in Major League Soccer, seems kind of ridiculous. Especially over the kind of last 10, 15 years, where as more teams come to the league, enforced parity when it comes to roster restrictions and salary caps, it's almost designed so you're not going to have necessarily multiple MLS Cup champions. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know, right? But that being said, when I look at the Western Conference and I look at some of the teams that at least maintained from last season, it's going to be kind of interesting to see if Miami's going to be able to do something like that. I don't know, man. I guess I'm in that boat where I have to see it to believe it. But I think that if there is any team that possibly could, it just might be Miami.
Yeah, I agree. It depends on health, obviously, with Messi and see what he can do. But I think the team is better today than they were 3 months ago.
Yeah, for sure. So in the Eastern Conference, it's kind of interesting, right? I think a lot of people were expecting Miami to do something. I don't necessarily think MLS teams were looking in the Eastern Conference were looking at what they did. I'm sure there's a lot of GMs out there that are kind of astonished that they were able to do what they were able to do. But that being said, when you look at Columbus losing Chuco Hernandez and they didn't necessarily replace him, you look at Nashville, a team that I actually was very high on last year, and there was times where I was kind of like a Nashville believer a little bit. You saw what Atlanta United did at the beginning, going into last season when they brought in Emmanuel Latelot. And they brought back Miguel Almiron. Those were signings of intent. And of course, it just didn't necessarily work out. And I thought there was going to be some movement when it came to the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, whether that be Columbus, whether that be Cincinnati, whether that be Nashville, somebody that was going to somebody that was at least going to have an intent to try to keep pace, maybe even Charlotte. And we didn't necessarily see that. And was this an issue of teams that are just running up against salary cap space? Or is this a situation where they'd rather wait till the summer window to make those moves? Because obviously in the summer window, you might be able to get better deals on players, especially when it comes to DP players, versus the winter window. Typically, in the winter window in the world, really, you don't see a lot of big names move. And that's usually the window where teams are looking for depth to finish out the season. You know what I mean? So from that standpoint, that's kind of what my line of thinking was, where maybe some of these teams are looking at the summer window versus the winter window.
Yeah, I think that's true. Miami's unique because they're trying to get the champions. They're trying to win the Champions Cup. So if they wait to the summer, it would do them no good. They need the roster, the players right now. Whereas some of these other teams, I don't think that's not really their goal. Now, would they like to win Champions Cup? Of course, but I don't think they're going to make any type of strategic moves in order to. They're not making any short-sighted moves or any current moves. They're looking long-term. It's been a thing in MLS for a long time. The summer's always been the main ticket item for making moves in the league. And it's kind of sad because it feels like the gap is going to widen even more in the Eastern Conference. Like you said, the Crew sold Cucho Hernandez last year. Now, they did bring in a backup or a replacement, Wessam Abu Ali from Al Ali, and he did look good when he was playing. He got injured, but it just feels like the Crew, who were a team that were very good for a couple of years under Wilfred Nancy, they're kind of at an identity crisis right now because they have a new manager coming in. We don't really know what he's going to do. So they're kind of maybe on the decline. I mean, I don't know for sure if they're going to, but I don't think they're going to be as good as what they were under Wilfred Nancy. There's just a lot of teams. It just feels like they're kind of kicking the can down the road. And it's a huge issue with the calendar is because that's when teams are willing to do business, like you said. And it sucks that 2/3 of the season are just kind of wasted. And they just kind of like treat it like a preseason almost, a warm-up, a tune-up part of the year. So, yeah, I mean, it's a little discouraging, and I do think it's bad. And I think that we're going to see some teams really, really separate early on in this first part of the season because of what they've done or haven't done.
Yeah, it's last off season when Cincinnati brought in Evander, I thought again that was a statement of intent. We saw in the playoffs exactly what that gap was versus Miami and where the work, essentially where the work was going to need to be replaced and where they needed to catch up. And I just didn't think they did it. Same thing with Columbus. But at the end of the day, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I'm looking at, especially in the Eastern Conference, and especially if Miami gets their rotation correct and they're able to keep Messi essentially fresh for that second half of the season, where they actually start making their sprint, even if they sprint in the first part of the season, there's not going to be any teams that are going to be able to close the gap. And it's going to be a race for second place. And it's looking like it's going to be a potentially another supporter shield type of season. And the gap is probably going to be like 10 points.
It could. It really just depends. If everything goes according to plan, then I just think the gap is widened and it's even further. And there were teams that could have done that, could have closed the gap and been more competitive. I thought LAFC could have been a lot better. I thought your team could have been a lot better. I mean, they won Leagues Cup and they honestly, they left a lot to be desired this season, and they still won a trophy. And I thought maybe if they could fix a couple of things, they could be even better this year. I guess they disagree with me. They're just going to roll pretty much with the same roster, except minus a few key players. And it's just disappointing. Like I said, LAFC was probably the biggest disappointment because of who they signed. I thought they were really going to go put all their chips in the middle of the table and really go for it this year. They have not done that. It's sad. And I actually made a video about that, saying that I think parity's dying because there's teams that just don't care, and they're just kind of conceding a little bit.
I think you might be right. And, of course, you just brought up my beloved Seattle Sounders. So let's go ahead and talk about it, because I got to be honest with you. You're now the fourth person I've asked this question to, and I'm going to ask it to you because it's important, at least to me and the rest of Sounders Nation back behind me, right? See, now, what was the plan? Coming into this offseason, you're absolutely right. They win Leagues Cup. There was a lot of momentum. They crash out in the first round of the playoffs to Minnesota. And you're kind of looking at the roster, thinking to yourself, it's kind of an aging core. And of course, a lot of these core players were dealing with a lot of injuries last year. And granted, I'll say this, man, at least you have a Danny Musovski to chip in with 19 goals last year. You don't have that. You have no idea how that front line is going to look. Pedro de la Vega hasn't necessarily hit the ground running in Major League Soccer, and you're relying on the wherewithal of maybe a Paul Rothrock or a Jesus Ferrer on the other side, right? So from that standpoint, you're kind of looking at it like, obviously there's areas to improve, but what's the plan? Is this going, is there going to be an overhaul here? Because this core is not only old, but it's breaking down. Something is going to have to give, and the answer is we're not going to bring back João Paulo, and we're also getting rid of one of our best midfielders to Atletico Madrid. By the way, that was a great move for not only the player and the team, but the reality is your answer to this question is Hassani Dotson. Essentially a rotational midfield piece that I think was what with Minnesota United last year. So what is the plan with the Seattle Sounders team?
I honestly have no idea. I had a friend ask me this a couple of days ago. Rave Green TV, Cheyenne.
Yeah.
I have no idea what their plan is. I said heading into this offseason, this was the most important offseason in the club history. Kind of like, a crossroad. Which way are we going? And it feels like they're just running back. They're going with the classic hits, man. They're just going to run it back again and hope, it's like what do they say, that the doing the same thing, expecting different results is the definition of insanity? I feel like that's what they're doing again, and one of the most frustrating parts about it is you mentioned about the Moose scoring 19 goals this year. And I think that as good of a season as he had, I still think he's better as maybe a depth piece. I don't think he should be your starting striker, but he outplayed Jordan Morris. And I think Jordan Morris's 2024 season was the most goals he had ever scored for the Sounders.
15,
15, which triggered him into being a DP. I think if he hit that threshold, he would be a DP. It just made me wonder what they could have done if they had a bona fide striker like they had at one time, like Rui Diaz, Obafemi Martins, like guys like that. How much better could they be? I mean, for God's sake, they won the Leagues Cup with De Rosario playing most of the games, and he's like the third or fourth option up top, and they still won the Leagues Cup. So what could they have done if they had signed somebody? I don't know what the expectations are. It feels like the club is just very directionless right now, and they have no identity. And I think you can even see that maybe with people I've talked to, that the fandom or the excitement is not anywhere close to what it was 10, 11 years ago.
Right.
So
right. But it's different though, right? Because prior to 2019, the majority owner was Joe Roth, the Hollywood producer, and he was an entertainer. Obviously, by nature, the dude makes movies for Christ's sake. And one of the things that he wanted to do was obviously entertain. And so, if back in the day, you would have a situation where every single year there was always the third DP was always bought down by TAM, and every single summer they were always going out, to try to at least bring in something in the summer that would give the fans something, something to bring in, something to cheer about. But if they needed a CDM, they went out and got. The Swedish guy. What's his name?
Was it Wolf? No. What was the guy?
Svensson. Gustav Svensson. They went out and got
That's what it was. Yeah.
Gustav Svensson. Or if they needed a right back, they went and got Kelvin Leerdam. right? They were always one step ahead of things, right? But then, Joe Roth sells his majority share. Adrian Hanauer and his group step in to buy it. And of course, Seattle's going to be that team that is never going to win the transfer window. That's fine. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but what's the plan? I was the only dude after the 2022 season that was looking at the roster and thinking to myself, this right now is the time to rebuild, because you have a couple players that made the World Cup squad, and their value is going to be as high as it will ever will be. Jordan Morris, Christian Roldan, I understand that they're like quintessential pieces to the brand. I get it. But the reality is these guys were 27, 28 then, and it was an opportunity to move on. And especially when you bring up Jordan Morris, as much as I love JMO, the dude can't stay healthy. Last year, he was out twice for long stretches of periods of time, and he just couldn't stay on the field. Last year, they signed Paul Arriola. He gets injured early. João Paulo goes down. Albert Rusnik goes down. And it's like, listen, man, there was a reason why I wanted it back in 2022 after the CONCACAF Champions Cup, because that was a perfect opportunity to sell it to the fans and just say, hey, listen, we had a nice little 7-8 year run where we went to 4 MLS Cups, 1-2, we won the Champions League. This period of time is always going to be sentimental, but we have to think about the long-term value, the long-term of this club. This is an opportunity to sell high on pieces that are getting old, and we can just reshuffle the deck and we can just build from there. They didn't do that. As a matter of fact, they extended it. They extended Christian Roldan and Jordan Morris and Stefan Fry. They just brought back Stefan Fry again. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I get it. Like, we won a cup last year, but is that a sign of something that's going to continue, or was that really like the last hurrah of this core?
Yeah, I mean, Stefan Fry, I don't understand why they brought him back. I thought Andrew Thomas looked like he was ready to take the reins. He won League Cup for him. I thought he was very solid for them. I think, like you said, they're just kind of holding on to nostalgia too much, not ready to move on from some of these players. But, Stefan Fry is going to be 40 years old this year, and I'm pretty sure Andrew Thomas turns 27 or 28 this year. So he's ready. He's primed to go. He's ready to be the starting goalkeeper, if not here, somewhere else. So that's just a bad sign for this team. And that's why, I haven't made an official prediction on what they're going to finish or how their season's going to go. But as currently constructed, I just don't see how this team is going to be very good. They have the 3 worst DPs in the league, that if any team that has 3 DPs. The players that they account for, like you said, they're just old. They're not very reliable anymore. They get injured. Jesus Ferreira was probably their crown jewel offseason signing last year, and he was a total dud. He wasn't very good last year for the Seattle Sounders. And their one key player who's very, very good when he plays is always hurt. Pedro de la Vega. Like, when he had some very promising games this summer. I mean, he's had promising games since he's been here, but he really looked like he maybe was turning a corner to be that pillar, that key player for them going forward. He gets injured again. So it just feels like this team is going to implode. That's the word I'm looking. That's my word, implode. I just feel like this thing is hanging on by the seams, and it's eventually going to crash down.
The only reason why I don't agree with that is because of Brian Schmetzer. I think Brian Schmetzer is right now probably the best coach in Major League Soccer. And I know that maybe you disagree with that, but when you consider his CV, and we consider the fact that there's been multiple times where this team probably shouldn't have made the playoffs due to injury or whatever the case may be, he's not only held it together, but he also delivered results in seasons where you probably think they would fall off. And so from that standpoint, I don't necessarily think they're going to implode, like not make the playoffs type of implode. But me personally, as of right now, I kind of have him in that 5th, 6th place finish type of area. If they can stay relatively healthy.
Yeah, I just think that a chef is only as good as his ingredients, and as good of a chef as he may be, I just don't think he's really working with much right now. And that's a problem. Now, Brian Schmetzer with Raul Ruiz, with Nico Ladero, with João Paulo, with Yamar, I still think is good. I don't think he's an issue. I think, but he was better 5 years ago. He was still very good. I think with some of these players, like, he was obviously effective because he's a good coach and he had good players around him. But I mean, Craig Weibel is probably one of the worst general managers in Major League Soccer. So, without a doubt. So he's giving him very poor ingredients to cook with. So it's not a Brian Schmetzer issue. It's more of a, what do I have readily available to me?
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? You're absolutely right. And again, this comes back to if there's no time like the present to blow this thing up, right? Because one of the biggest issues with Seattle is they really are up against their salary cap because of contracts that they sign, because of escalators that move players into positions where roster positions where all of a sudden it needs a large chunk of money. They can't do much. But again, that's not really excusable as far as I'm concerned, because at the end of the day, I still think they have a pretty solid backline goalkeeper. It's just, now you're in a position where you're losing the wrong players, and you're keeping the players that quite honestly can't stay healthy. And so I don't know, man. I look at this as I look at this almost like this, right? Because we're coming up to the calendar flip in about a year and a half. And I would probably assume that when we get to that transfer window, we probably will see something. Me personally, I always looked at this was a COVID issue from back in 2020, 2021, 2022. And when they came out of it, I think really what they really needed was stability in season ticket renewals and, single game ticket type of things. They needed that revenue. And that's the reason why they kept on keeping some of these players. And they necessarily really haven't been active because, again, you can't necessarily sell a rebuild coming out of what they came out of. On top of the fact, I think they're trying to get their new stadium built as well. I don't know if you know this, right? They built the new training complex down in Tukwila, which is like 20 minutes south of Seattle, and they want to build a stadium there. And I think one of the biggest reasons why they're not necessarily focused on the first team and why they just want to keep this crew intact is they're trying to secure financing for their new stadium. Me personally, I think that's really what this comes down to.
Well, I really hope Adrian Hanauer sells the team because I think that the city deserves someone better than him, more committed to spending. I had a debate with a guy a couple last years that tried to tell me that Seattle was never ambitious, which is just not true. They definitely weren't ambitious at one point. They signed the guy behind you when that seemed unthinkable at one time to bring the MLS at 30 years old. Yeah. I mean, it seemed unthinkable to get him to come here at 30 years old, especially a year before the World Cup, 2013, heading in 2014. So I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that at all. I don't think that that's true.
Yeah.
I think that this current form of them is not ambitious, but they were at one point. I think that you guys are kind of in an awkward position. It's almost like you're stuck in purgatory. You're not really good like you once were, but you're not bad enough to blow things up. So it feels like you're just kind of stuck, honestly. And I think that that's why they keep running out the same old tunes, is because they really haven't completely collapsed yet. So that's why I think that this year is good for Seattle. I think that they're either I don't think they're going to be fifth or sixth. I think that they're either going to be really, really bad, or maybe somebody emerges and they are a little better. But if they are fifth or sixth or seventh, like you said, I just don't think that's a good spot to be in, because it feels like they've been hovering there for a while now. Now, I know they made it to the Western Conference Final in 2024 and played the LA Galaxy, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think that Seattle team was that good. Like, I think last year's Seattle team was better than that Seattle team. Personally, right. I think that last year's team was better. So I think it would be better if they were just bad. I think they would blow it up and they would hit the reset button like you and many Seattle fans probably would want to. So it's more like a short-term pain for long-term gain type of situation.
I still think they should have done it after 2022, but that's just me. It is what it is. But I just looked at it that as the opportune time, considering some of those top players were at the peak of their value. When you talk about Jordan Morris and Cristiano Ronaldo going to the World Cup in 2022, that offseason, you easily could have moved them. And whether that was, straight up player swaps or whatever the case may be, or if they get sold overseas, whatever the case may be, that was the opportunity to do it, because with 3 DP spots open, and moving some of these pieces, like the possibilities were endless. I know last summer there was a rumor that Paxton Aronson was potentially coming. He ends up landing in Colorado, but that would have been a massive signing for Seattle. Shifting north of the border to Vancouver, and by the way, of the Cascadia teams last year, Vancouver was far and away the best team. One of the things that it didn't necessarily surprise me that Vancouver wasn't necessarily active. I think really what they were just trying to do is to keep that team intact and make another run. When you looked at that season as a whole, I don't think Vancouver had a weakness anywhere on the pitch. And when you look at that MLS Cup final, they nearly pulled it off. It was it ended up being a little bit of a heartbreaker. But that being said, it looks like this team is going to come back and it's going to be firing on all cylinders. And if they can keep Brian White healthy, I would probably assume that that's probably going to be the team that's going to rock the Western Conference next year.
I think there's a good chance. I think the Western Conference is pretty wide open. They lost a couple pieces. They lost Ali Ahmed, who I think he's been doing really well with Norwich recently.
Yeah.
But true. Ryan Gauld will be healthy. He'll probably slide into that position. I think they'll be in contention, but I don't know. I think the Western Conference is wide open. I think there's a lot of teams that can compete for it. I just don't think Seattle's one of them. But there are a couple teams that I think will be right there at the forefront. You got LAFC. I think LA Galaxy will be better in 2026. I think Vancouver's obviously going to be pretty good. San Diego, I think, is going to take a step back because they really didn't do much this offseason. But there's going to be a lot of – I think the West is completely wide open. I wouldn't even begin to know who the favorite would be.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I still think Cascadia is going to be ruling the Western Conference, at least from Vancouver's point. But I will say this, right? You're absolutely right about LA Galaxy. Of the two LA teams, I actually thought that the LA Galaxy had a really good offseason. Now it sucks that they lose Ricky Puig again. I'm sure that was a dagger. But really, when you kind of look at some of the things that they did in the offseason, bringing in Eric Tommy, Justin Hawk, and Christian Ramirez, I think that it's like they also brought in Kyle Smith, Tom Barlow, Ayub Jabari, and Edmir Chavez as well too as a homegrown. It looks like the LA Galaxy actually were, operating from a position of intent as well too, considering I don't want to necessarily say it was a letdown last year, although that being said, I think there was that hangover not having that focal point in their attack. They lost their primary striker as well too to Sporting Kansas City. And so they weren't necessarily operating, with a full deck last year. It just seemed like this offseason, the intent was to get back into the top 5 of the Western Conference. And I actually thought LA had a brilliant offseason.
Yeah, I think they did too. Their biggest move was probably trading for João Klaus from St. Louis City FC, who will be a DP, correct, which is a little bit of a bummer for them. I don't think he's a DP quality player, but I do think he'll be a huge upgraded striker for what they need. Since they've missed Joveljic when he went to Sporting Kansas City. Yeah. So yeah, I think they're going to be much improved. I just don't know what that will translate into, because Ricky Puig is their best player. He's not going to play for a second straight season. Absolutely devastating. And I think that morale could be down a little bit because they were really looking forward to getting him back, and they know how important he is after this bad season. So it's going to be a make or break season for this team. There's going to be a lot of, if they don't make the playoffs or significantly improve, there's going to be a lot of heads rolling on that team.
Are we talking manager sacking type of heads rolling?
General manager, players, everybody. Yeah. Like there's everyone's seat will be hot.
Fair. I probably would agree with that as well too. On the other side though, LAFC, what did you make of LA's offseason? I know earlier in the show you mentioned it was not up to your expectations for a club as big as LAFC.
Yeah, it was very disappointing. They hired a manager who was a reject in MLS, yeah, who's failed at every other stint. He's the worst manager in Vancouver Whitecaps history statistically, and he gets promoted with a top 3 job in the league. Only his qualifications in this last couple of years is being an assistant for that team, who a lot of people, including me, thought Steve Cherundolo was not a good manager. He was just fortunate to have great ingredients to cook with. So, but I think that's a terrible hire, and it shows no vision, very lazy, easy hire. And then they obviously didn't do enough to improve their weaknesses heading into this 2026 season, because if they were good enough to win, if they didn't have many weaknesses, they would have won MLS Cup. Every team has weaknesses. Yeah. So I just felt like they kind of kicked the can down the road. They're probably waiting to the summer to see what happens. And I don't like their offseason. I think that there were a plethora of things that they should have done that they chose not to address at this moment, on top of hiring a bad manager. And it feels like they're wasting Son Heung-min, which is a shame because he's really, really good. And there was drama with Denny Bwanga being sold, possibly. Just very, very, chaotic and underwhelming offseason.
I'll say this: it was a head scratcher for me when Mark Dos Santos was appointed as head coach. Everything that you just said is 100% true, but considering the ownership group that's there in LA, and the fact that they've been trying to get Antoine Griezmann, they ended up with Son Heung-min, and all of the I guess you can say the globetrotting that ownership group does to bring big name players to LA. And there was also talk that this was actually going to be a destination in Major League Soccer where potentially European, they might be able to attract European coaches as well too. And the interesting thing was that at the very least, maybe they would tap a young manager at the very least if you can attract a big name. Maybe try to tap a young manager that's on its way up. But that being said, it was a retread that, at least for me, came out of left field, because I didn't think a club of that caliber would put themselves. Me personally, they put themselves behind the eight ball. Bringing in a guy that really is not really on that level. I got to be honest with you, I was kind of disappointed.
I think retread is honestly being generous. I mean, some retreads have at least had some success in previous stints. He's never even experienced that in MLS. So you're expecting a guy, you're handing the keys to the ship to this guy who's never proven he can do it anywhere, and expecting him to miraculously be the answer to this team's faults or deficiencies. So, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty bad. I mean, I don't think they're going to lose, or they're not going to not make the playoffs because they just have too much star power with Denny Bwanga and Son Heung-min, but it's just not going to be as good as what it could have been if they had hired a better manager.
I would agree. Is there, by the way, in the Western Conference, is there a dark horse team that you're looking at in the Western Conference? Maybe didn't necessarily have the pizzazz with off-season moves, but maybe it was a coaching change that you're looking at it. Like maybe the coach actually fits the sum of the parts. Is there a team in the Western Conference that you're kind of looking at?
I don't think there's a dark horse. I mean, there's a team that I think will be better in 2024 and 2026, just because that wasn't good in 2025. The Dynamo, I don't think a lot of people, they're on many people's radars, but they made a couple additions. They brought back Hector Herrera, who went to Liga MX after his stint with Houston Dynamo. He's back for veteran leadership on a non-DP deal. They signed Matty Bogusz, who was a star for LAFC for 2 years, and many people think he's their best player in 2024. He's going to be the star of the Houston Dynamo. So the Dynamo is a team that I'm keeping an eye on, because I think it's a make or break year for them as well. Because if they don't win, they might fire Ben Olsen and completely blow that thing up. So that's a team that I'm thinking of in the Western Conference, and I don't think a lot of people have on their radar.
I kind of have the Colorado Rapids circled on my dartboard here. I like the addition of Matt Wells. He was a Tottenham Hotspur assistant. He comes over, and through their preseason, it looks like the advertising was worth it. It looks like looks like the Colorado Rapids are playing expansive ball, and it looks like the system actually kind of fits the pieces. My only question with Colorado is A, where the goal's coming from, and B, whether or not their defense is going to be able to hold up throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I do think Colorado might be competitive in 2026. I'm not too familiar with their coach. I know, like you said, he's from Tottenham. I didn't think Chris Armas was a very good manager. Now, he was definitely a retread. I don't know how he got so many jobs in MLS. I think that they could be competitive. I like Zach Steffen. Paxton Aronson, I'm curious to see what he can do in a full season with the Colorado Rapids. But I don't know. I just feel like the Rapids have kind of I do think they'll be a little better in 2026. I'm just not very high on them. I don't know. I don't expect much of them. They haven't done anything to really wow me. And even when Paxton Aronson, I think he played a couple games last year for them because he moved very late in the summer window. I think he moved in August or maybe even September.
Yeah.
I just don't really remember him doing much in the short time he was there. Like nothing, miraculous, especially for them paying $9 or $10 million for him. I think that he, I honestly think Matty Bogusz will have a bigger impact than Paxton Aronson will at the Colorado Rapids.
Mm, fair, fair. Shifting gears real quick, and just let me ask you this question real quick because I'm curious about how you feel about it. As far as U.S. men's national team players that are eventually coming, like some are already back. Obviously, the Colorado Rapids, Paxton Aronson. The interesting thing was I guess you can say the rumor mill of surrounding Josh Sargent. That deal didn't get done, and I'm sure that we're probably going to hear something coming in the summer. That deal was not able to get done for Toronto FC. I'm curious about the profile of a player like that in Major League Soccer. Now, of course, in the EFL Championship, he was damn near a 20-goal scorer, and it seemed to be at that level. But that being said, I'm kind of curious to see how his game translates to Major League Soccer.
Josh Sargent, yeah, I like what he could do for Toronto FC. I do think that deal will get done eventually. I'm not sure. Norwich has all the leverage because I think he just recently signed a 5-year deal. They don't really have any. He doesn't really have any leverage to dictate when he gets sold or how he gets sold or any of that. I mean, they kind of have him by the balls, honestly. And he kind of didn't help himself with how he played it out with missing the match and hitting with the manager. Right. So I think this could play out all the way, maybe even until April, or who knows, maybe even the summer. Maybe they tell him to kick rocks and he stays till the summer. But at that point, it makes you wonder if Toronto FC end up moving on. But as far as Josh Sargent, what would he do in MLS? I think he'd be very good. I don't know if he'd be a golden boot leader or anything like that, but I think he could score 15 to 20 goals consistently for Toronto FC if he has decent service. Yeah. And I think he'd be one of the best strikers in Major League Soccer because I don't think the championship is that far from MLS. I think it's very similar in quality of play.
Well, kinda, right? Like maybe the bottom half of the championship. I would probably assume that considering the balloon payments for teams that are coming down from the Premier League, they operated at a little bit of a higher level than the bottom half, those that are without balloon payments. And so they're able to keep certain players from their time in the Premier League. And so maybe the quality might be better at the top half of the championship. But that being said, when you see a guy like Patrick Agyemang, who may or may not finish with 15 plus goals this year in the championship, considering he missed the first month and a half, it kind of gives you an idea that, a specific striker profile actually can, pretty much do well in the championship. That being said, in the summer, are you expecting certain U.S. men's national team players that apply their trade in Major League Soccer to get moved on to the summer? A guy like a Diego Luna or maybe a Max Arfston?
Yeah, I do. I do think they most likely will leave after the World Cup because both of them will likely be at the World Cup for the USMNT. Now, I don't know how much they're going to play. Arfston would be my betting favorite to get more minutes than Luna because it seems like Pochettino really loves him some Max Arfston. He loves Diego Luna too, but he really likes some Max Arfston. I do think they will probably leave. Now, the sticking point more specifically with Luna is his price tag. I've heard that they want $12 to $15 million for him, and I just don't know if there's any team that's going to pay that for Diego Luna. I'm thinking more of like the $7 to $8 million range for his services. So that's the sticking point with him as far as his move. Now, he is only 22 years old. He'll be 23 this year, so he's still pretty young. Now, Max Arfston's been linked to several different clubs. I think he almost got to move to Toulouse.
That's right. Wasn't there an offer for, I think it was like, what, 3.5 last year?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. So I think they're both going to be on the move, maybe even a couple other ones. I mean, we saw Alex Freeman obviously go to Villarreal recently, and, I think he's going to be really good over there long term. So, yeah, I think there's going to be an exodus of USMNT players that I think are going to leave when the selling is at its highest. Now, is it going to be the exact number that these teams want? Probably not, but it's going to be pretty good. I think Diego Luna ends up getting sold for like $10 million, and Max Arfston probably $3.5 million, and I do think they both will leave.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat as well too. I did a video recently on essentially five players that need to make the jump this upcoming year. Actually, Freeman was on that list as well too, and of course he makes the move to Villarreal. But Diego Luna and Max Harpson were on it, and I think what's his name from Houston Dynamo, the kid that got sold from Philadelphia last year.
But Jack McGlynn.
Yeah, Jack McGlynn. There you go. And his name was on it as well too. Certain player profiles that obviously are good in Major League Soccer, but in the right system, with the right coaches in Europe, the ceiling actually raises even higher. And of course, that would be great for our national team as well too. But that being said, it's like at a certain point, you're kind of looking at players thinking like, yeah, you might just be a little bit too good for Major League Soccer.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. You don't want players to be stuck here too long. You want them to test themselves. You want them to go abroad and see if they can become a better version. Now, sometimes players do leave too early and they fail and they come back. There's been several of that happen. Several examples of that. But I do think that it's always best to at least try and see if you can cut your teeth in a better league, across the pond.
Mm-hmm. Before we close this out, I do want to talk to you a little bit about what 2026. What is the expectation for you in 2026, specifically with the World Cup? What is that going to do for this league long term? Is there anything with player development you're looking for this year? What are just your overall expectations for the 2026 season?
Well, for MLS, it's just to get more fandom, get more people to tune in and give the league a chance. And I'm not really sure they've done the best job leading up to this, getting that to happen. You would have thought they would have maybe changed the calendar before, maybe increased the spending right before, just to, give a little of injection of excitement heading into the 2026 season. But I just think the World Cup, having a good performance by the USMNT, just to show that we're a serious soccer nation, that we've not necessarily arrived, but that we are building something special, will help energize casual fans to maybe want to check out the domestic league because they're like, oh my God, this is incredible. USMNT, do we have a league? Oh, I have to check it out. I have to watch it. So I feel like the USMNT success will play a hand in getting some new fans, but also I think just the World Cup in general will play in getting new people to watch the league because this event hasn't happened here in 32 years. It's going to generate insane buzz, and there are going to be new fans galore who are going to check out this league, and they have to make sure they stick around. So you asked me what the goals are for this year. I think that they have to get new fans. They have to make sure they capitalize on who they have here, like Messi. And I think they really need to capitalize on getting a couple of these stars at the World Cup to come to Major League Soccer after the 2026 World Cup is over with.
Yeah, I just want to know what the league's identity is. Is this going to be a developmental league where you're pushing players, or is this going to be, a league where you're still trying to bring in, veteran European players? I know that Robert Lewandowski is still linked to Chicago, and it's like, okay, cool, we've seen that ad nauseum. Or is this going to be, a type of league where you're going to use your DP spots to bring in young players? And you're going to raise the ground floor with youth. Me personally, I would love to know what the identity of this league is moving forward. And I'm kind of with you as well too, where we have the infrastructure now in Major League Soccer. We have training facilities, we have academies, we have soccer specific stadiums, we have owners that are measured in billions and not hundreds of millions. And so from that standpoint, I understand why the cap is where it's at, but in 2026, it makes absolutely no sense. This isn't 1996 where the league was, just starting, and over the course of the 5 years, you were wondering whether or not there was going to be survival. It survived, and it's growing and it's thriving, and it's to the point where, me personally, I look at the league and I'm like, it can do a lot better. When it's the third most watched, our top flight is the third most watched soccer league in this country, right behind the Premier League and Liga MX. And so from that standpoint, it's like, I'm not asking them to rip off the Band-Aid, but that being said, it's like, would it kill you to raise the salary cap to $10 to $15 million and allow certain owners that want to spend to let them spend it? Get rid of the DPs and get rid of these wacky roster rules and just allow teams to build accordingly. And if they want to build out through their academy, let them build out through their academy, whatever the case may be. But that being said, if it means that Inter Miami and LAFC are at the top of the pile for 5 years, all it's going to do is make other teams work harder to get back up there. And when you actually have competition in the league, it grows the league. You're going to get fans that are going to be interested in it because, quite honestly, that's just the way it works. But also sell your storylines. If Inter Miami is a hated entity, then sell it. Do your marketing job, right? I mean, Major League Baseball did it brilliantly with the New York Yankees throughout the late '90s and early 2000s. They were absolutely hated, and that's why people tuned in, because they always wanted to see them get their asses kicked. You know what I mean? That's, I can tell you, when I watch Inter Miami, that MLS Cup final, I'm a Seattle dude, and I was rooting for Vancouver. You know what I mean? Like that, sell the league.
Yeah, they've always done a poor job of doing that. I don't know if that's going to change in the near future. There's a lot of things they could do. It's more of a wait and see for me. I've honestly lost or gotten exhausted of, pounding the table for them to change anything. 2027 is going to be the make or break year if they do anything with the new collective bargaining agreement. That will tell us what the league wants to be going forward with what their investment's going to be. There are owners that want to spend. There's owners that don't want to spend. But who's going to win that civil war? That's the biggest question. So, I mean, I would like to see this league become top 5 in the world. I think it's got all the potential to do that, but it's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to take a little bit of investment. It's going to take some commitment from people who are not ready to do that just yet. One great player does not make a league great.
Correct.
And we found that out. So, and also too, I'm really excited to see what life after Don Garber looks like. That's because but just because he's been the commissioner essentially its entire existence. I want to see some fresh new ideas, a new direction, see if someone can take this to the next point. He took it from point A to point B, but I want to see what point B to point C looks like and how much better it can truly get. So 2027 is really the date that people need to circle their calendars for the change, because of the CBA expiring and the calendar to the Euro calendar change is the most important year for MLS specifically. But this is kind of a launch pad into that.
And I'm also curious to see on the backside of the World Cup 2026, moving into 2027, when the USL launches their first division. Of course, they're coming heavy with Pro-Rel in the 2027-2028 calendar year, and what that looks like for the U.S. soccer landscape. And I don't know how you feel about it, but that being said, I'm kind of intrigued by it. And as somebody that has a USL championship team literally 30 minutes down the freeway from where I'm at in Detroit, they're coming into a new stadium, and I think they're going to make the jump to the first division as well too. And it's going to be interesting to see how that competes with Major League Soccer, and whether or not the investment's going to go in the opposite direction to the USL, and then what that means for the landscape of American soccer as well too. So I don't know, man. Like the next 5 years for American soccer, it's going to be very, very intriguing, and it's also going to be very interesting as well too.
I agree. I'm curious to see what USL's plan does to MLS, and if it sets a fire under them. And I do think it's, like I said, 2027 is really going to be the year for MLS to see what direction they want to go. That's the most important year. If they don't do what I think they should do, or what many fans want them to do, then
what do you think they should do? What do you think they should do?
I think they should increase the salary cap, get rid of some of the rules, lax them, and I think that they should just make their soccer league more similar to other top leagues in the world. If they want to be better than them, they can't do it the way they've been doing it. They need to kind of make, and also too, it's hard to get casual fans to follow your league if most people don't understand your rules to begin with. Hell, some of the general managers don't understand the rules. So I just think they need to simplify it, make it more accessible, and they just need to show that they want to invest and make the product better.
I would also like to see them be, as far as their television is concerned, be on a platform where A, you're not behind a paywall, and B, being on a network that's accessible around the world as well too. I think that would more or less help. I think we're in a different spot than we were 15 years ago in Major League Soccer. So from that standpoint, I tend to agree with you. All right, last question before we go, Will. What does the U.S. men's national team do in World Cup 2026?
Oof. Man. It could be either really bad or really good. I want to say that they at least make it to the I want to say they at least make it to the round of 16, which would be an extra game. I mean, that's where they made it last time when they lost to the Netherlands, but they have to play an extra.
Yeah.
There's 48 teams. I'd like to see them to make it to the final 8 or the semifinals or quarterfinals. I'd like to see them make it to the quarterfinals, but I'm thinking they make it to the round of 16. Hopefully I'm wrong, though.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this. Our World Cup roster is going to be the best World Cup roster we've ever put out. And, of course, with my national team, I go all the way back to 88, 89. And I've seen pretty much every World Cup in what I consider the modern era of the U.S. men's national team. And don't get me wrong, that 2002 team was good. This team has an opportunity to be better. And when you look at most of these guys are coming into their second cycle, this probably should have been Christian's third, but, obviously 2017. It seems like most of these guys are coming in their prime. And I think we actually have the most depth. I think we have a coach that's going to get the most out of it. And me personally, I think this team is capable of a quarterfinal.
I think they could be, but it just depends. I mean, there'd have to be some things go their way and their luck of the draw. I think it could get ugly really fast based on looking at the possibilities. But yeah, I mean, I do think that they should at least talent-wise make it to the quarterfinals. I think that's very doable. And if they make it to the quarterfinals, that's incredible. It means they won 2 knockout matches. That would be right. I'd be very content with that.
Yeah, because I think I was kind of sussing it out a little bit, and I think if things draw the way that you would expect it, I think they potentially run into Spain in that second knockout.
Yeah.
Past the round of 32 and the round of 16. That's probably where they'll run into Spain. But that being said, if we get a few breaks, I don't know, man. I just think this is a golden opportunity, and this, for me at least, is this pound for pound will be the best World Cup roster I think we'll ever put out. And from that point, I guess I don't know. I look at this as a golden opportunity on home soil. So Mauricio Pochettino leaves for Tottenham after the World Cup. I think that's going to happen. Who replaces him?
Hopefully not. Hopefully, I don't think he's going to do that. I honestly, I'm not sure. There's a lot of interesting candidates. Do they go MLS? Do they go back to MLS? I think they're going to probably have an interim manager for a year or two, like they've done before. And sure. I think I think that the guy that they hire is probably not even going to be on our radar right now. I bet they hire someone we're not even thinking about. Like you could look at Nancy, you could look at Dolo, you could look at maybe if Jesse Marsh gets let go by Canada, does he come to coach the USMNT? I'm not sure. I think it's probably going to be someone that we're not really thinking of. It's going to come out of left field.
I got one for you. And I'll make the case. Brian Schmetzer. So here's the thing, right? If you're going to go the MLS route, you might as well hire the guy that has won virtually everything in United States soccer. And this is not just MLS. And of course, he's won what? 2 MLS Cups. He's won a CONCACAF Champions Cup. He's won the US Open Cup, and he even won a Supporter Shield at one time. But he also, prior to that, he won trophies in the USL. Dude's a winner. So if you're going to go the MLS route, you might as well hire the guy that's virtually won everything.
Yeah, I just think the one thing against Brian is that he's going to be too old. He's going to be like 65 probably by the time he takes over, and I just don't think they're going to want to go in that direction. And plus, I don't think Brian really has interest in coaching. I think he's a club coach. I don't think he wants to coach national team ball, honestly. I think once he leaves the Sounders, that's probably going to be it for him.
You think? You think he would turn down? You think he would turn down the U.S. if they came calling? You think he would turn it down?
I don't know if he would turn it down, but I don't know if they're going to come calling. Is what I'll say.
I would think that potentially a guy like Pellegrino Matarazzo. Yeah, somewhere along the lines that has that European pedigree. Maybe depending on his situation, come after the summer. But that being said, he's currently in a rescue mission there in Spain right now. So we'll see exactly how it plays out. But I'll tell you what, Will, I do want to thank you for coming on. Quickly before we go, man, what's going on in MLS Moves?
Well, I just dropped 5 biggest winners and losers of the offseason video last week, and I got a couple prediction videos heading this week, so just be on the lookout for that.
Excellent, man. I will definitely be on the lookout for that. Quickly before we go, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell as well too, so you don't miss out on any upcoming Stateside Footy content. And of course, on Tuesday it is USMNT Yanks Abroad, and that will be the last video for the week as I take off for London on Thursday. And of course, I will be doing some live stuff from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday, as it is the North London Derby, and I will be there. Spurs versus Arsenal. Come on, you Spurs. And from that standpoint, I will be back the weekend after. And of course, the MLS live stream will start firing up as well too, as quite honestly, I've been looking forward to the MLS season since essentially the final whistle MLS Cup. So I am going to, essentially what I'm going to do is cram MLS down your throats this season. And it's going to be absolutely fantastic as well too. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell. Will, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I want to thank those that are tuning in. And we'll call it right there. You guys enjoy your evening. I hope you guys had a great weekend. Good night.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.